Welcome to the Josh Button Podcast, where we discuss health, wellness, and outliers from society. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Josh Button Podcast. This is episode 61. Today, I'm joined by Liev Dalton, the host of the Beyond Terrain podcast. We've talked a little bit about terrain versus germ theory here on this space, but I can't wait to get your perspective of the subject, how you got your start into it. You've covered a ton of other information on your page and on your podcast, and I think everybody needs to go there. But first, tell us about yourself, man. How did you get into this world in the first place?
Well, I really appreciate being here. Really appreciate you giving me the time and the platform. I love having these conversations. It was a pretty interesting story, I guess, interesting to me. I was doing biochemistry at university. I was on my way to become a dental surgeon, believe it or not. So I was pretty deep in the modern academic space, fully on their side, vaccines and antibiotics and all that good stuff. I was taking microbiology classes. I was thinking of switching into micro, but I didn't want to torture myself with another year of school by the end of it. So end of the second year, COVID hit. It started politically. I didn't agree with how it was being dealt with politically, and so I kind of pushed back from the start. I never really bought into the whole narrative. Obviously, I wasn't, so far as denying the existence of viruses and germ theory and all that stuff. But yeah, so it just kind of pushed me into looking deeper, and I just sort of went deeper and deeper, looking for some sort of truth, and yeah, led me to some great people like Dr. Kaufman, Dr. Cohen, Lando, so many great minds, and then going back in history and studying Béchamp, and even the origins of germ theory was really helpful in sort of allowing me to change my perspective, right? Because I had quite the indoctrination, initially, and but yeah, I know it was cool, and so I finished my degree. I'm just about to finish a master's of counseling psychology now. Sort of get me in the door with working with individuals. I really love talking and working with people. So I kind of took the psychological perspective, because a lot of the principles that I would tell someone to do, from the health perspective can all be said in that setting, things like getting outside and grounding and, getting some good sleep, eating a good diet. These are all things that I don't necessarily want to try to sell. Um, you know, Counseling, from the mental perspective, I find it's a whole different realm, right? Our mind works really well at blocking certain things out, working with trauma, stuff like that. So I kind of went down that avenue, which has been really interesting. And I think it was the right choice for me. Um, because yeah, I give all that health information out, for free because health is free. All of this stuff is free. It's natural. You just got to get back to nature. And that's kind of what I learned along the way. Just nature really has all the answers. And I keep going back to that time and time again. You just got to look at nature if you want the answers. So yeah, I'm sure we could delve into many different topics today, and I'm really looking forward to this chat. But yeah, hopefully that gives a decent background on who I am and what I do.
Man, that's incredible. I ask people all the time when I start into these conversations, and I go, well, because I know it's going to come up at some point. I say, are you formally indoctrinated? And they, of course, either look
Yes,
at me
sir.
like, what are you talking about? Or, yeah, absolutely. I understand exactly what you mean. And, obviously you've spent that much time in the classroom. You've gone through all of the steps and the processes that you would have to graduate, to pass the exams. What like literally triggered you in the first place that left you open to the opposite side, the full on opposite spectrum of what you've been taught?
Yeah, it's funny, like that trigger, like what was that trigger, I kind of, even prior to COVID, like, after first year, I kind of had some sort of awakening in a way, right? I kind of just started to align myself with something greater than, the path I was on, right? I was on not a very good path, a lot of quick lifestyle things, rambling lifestyle, a lot of drinking, smoking, whatever, like, um, and I kind of just decided, like I'm done with this. I want to clean things up. I met my girlfriend. She's now my wife, and that was sort of a huge catalyst for me. with aligning myself in some sort of higher purpose, right? So, um, I kind of felt like I was aligned with that greater purpose and striving for something that's meaningful, something that's really purposeful, that's gonna, when I look back on my life when I'm 80, 90 years old, telling stories that I'll have stories to tell, and I'll have, you know, a life that I've lived. So, that's kind of the way that I started looking at things. And I always had that in me a little bit, right? Like, my parents raised me, I think, very well and really respected my autonomy and my voice and my opinion, and so really fostered my own curiosity, of course, growing up. But really, it was that time in my life, that switch, when it was like, I need to do something meaningful. And so that kind of just led me down this path of looking at things curiously. Even in first year, before all the COVID stuff, I was in bio class, and it was like I was still questioning all of these things that we were being taught, right? There were so many things that didn't line up, and I did have this perspective that there is something greater than all of these chemicals and all this material, so that was sort of a really big thing. And I think just aligning with, higher power, purpose, meaning with yourself, really trying to understand yourself. These are all the fundamental things that put me on this path. That really allowed me to have the freedom to rethink things, because I was secure enough in myself, who I was as an individual, that I didn't have to cling to some sort of narrative. That's one of the things with a lot of these scientists, and not to knock, anybody down, but the thing is that when you're deep in the field and you're doing 20, 30 years of research in microbiology on why germs cause disease, you're not just going to be able to flip the switch, because that's your whole identity. You're not anyone outside of the laboratory. You're not anyone, you're our doctor, that's who you are. But that doesn't define us. These things, these titles, they don't define us, right? So, sort of being an individual, that's all I am. I'm just a person. I'm just me, and that's kind of one of those things. It gave me the freedom to be able to rethink and question all these things. And I still do to this day. I'm still rethinking things that I've learned and thought were correct. And you just got to keep learning, growing, being curious.
It's absolutely risky business, but it's funny you said something there that so many of us in this space kind of that we parallel each other in regards to, and that is finding purpose from understanding that the life we were living wasn't really fulfilling. It wouldn't really tell the truth about what we could become or who we really were. And I think like part of it is a lot of us are tied to these things that we were taught and to the ecosystem in which we were raised, and we kind of identify with those things for a while until we know change is absolute must. So for myself, it was the same. I was partying and drinking, and I lived that life for a long time because that was the normal life. And until I actually took a step back and said, I want something more, I really didn't wrap my head around so much of this that I've learned to be true. So you were in school. You did you live the typical college party life in school? And
For a year, yeah,
yeah,
it was first year, and then I was like, "Wow, I'm done, man. I got my fix." But I mean, we start pretty young where I'm from, so I think I started like boozing when I was pretty young. So I got my fix like in high school, and yeah, I'm good. So I was like, "This is it, man. I gotta chill." After first year, so then yeah, I met my girlfriend, and then like years two, three, four, um, you know, I guess we got married last summer, so yeah, I mean, just like a year out of university, pretty much, I was like, yeah, so I got on that path quick. I didn't want to spend too much time there.
that's awesome, man. Maturation ahead of the curve compared to most of us, I think, for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, COVID hits at this interesting time in your life, and like for so many of us that are as well in this space, it registered things that didn't really add up. And you came to terrain theory just by your own studies? So did somebody turn you onto this and like really kind of get in your head and like piss you off or perturb you for a little while before you like were willing to entertain it, or how did it come about?
Yeah, so I was questioning the political side of things, and then I, kind of went a little deeper, and I was like, oh, let's look at the science behind it. And I was coming to the conclusion that it was created in a lab and they've spread from the lab. And I kind of just kept, wanting to learn more about that, right? Because I always like to, if I'm going to think something, I want to have an argument for it. Like if anyone's going to ask me what I think, I want to be able to talk about it and, have some knowledge on it. So I just kept looking and looking. that didn't necessarily disturb my entire, you know, indoctrination at that point. But then I stumbled upon Dr. Andrew Kaufman's channel, watched a couple videos of his, and I went down into the comments on one of his videos and left a pretty long comment, like a whole paragraph, like just about I'm a biochemistry student, blah blah blah, viruses this and germs cause disease, all that stuff, right? And I never, like, never, ever, ever did anything like that in my life. So it really did, like, hit a nerve when I was watching these videos on germs not causing disease, because I was so sure of this, right? This was the real thing that shattered my worldview. And so I had a lot of time on my hands because this was like March, and I was fishing lobster in PEI. So I'd fish all morning, get home, and I'd just be so wiped. So I'd go on my laptop, watch YouTube for like the rest of the day. And I just started learning more and more about it. And I was like, he responded in a very respectful comment and just said, like, watch this video. And that just led me to watching more and more content on it. I was like, all right, I'm going to disprove this. I'm going to disprove why germs actually do cause disease. They do cause disease, and I want to prove that correct. So I did that, and I studied more and more and more, and I looked at the original papers, Pasteur, Koch, Jenner, all the original guys. I looked at the modern literature. I looked at even the other side. What was Kaufman saying? What was Cohen saying? All these heavy hitters right in the field. And it just, the more I learned about it, the more I disproved the germ theory. Like, when I was looking at it fundamentally, and I was really trying to be objective, and I was on the other side. Like, I was against the terrain model completely, and I was trying to disprove it. In trying to do so, the bit inside me, I just couldn't deny it. I couldn't deny it. And so through these papers and all these original experiments, and even the modern papers are even worse than the original experiments. At least the original experiments tried to, you know, like dupe us a little bit. These modern experiments, they're really not accomplishing anything. It's all just theory laden. Um, but it was that. It was that I was trying to disprove it, and it just kept going. And then I just fell in love with it, and I was like, oh, this is actually pretty cool. Like, germs don't cause disease, you don't got to worry about this. And I'm like, well, this is crazy, because like, look, the response that we have towards this pandemic, that's absolute nonsense, based on, like, the nonsense of science, of academia, and all these people are talking about PCR and, like, these tests, and that make no sense, that have never truly been validated. And there's really no evidence behind any of it. And you'd think, like, that there's all this fundamental research surrounding these topics. There's really not. Like, if you will try to get, like, Koch's postulate studies now, you can't find them. If you want to find, like, a study on the use of PCR, there's literally a handful of studies on a controlled setting using PCR. And at the end of the paper, they say, this is not for diagnostic purposes. This is only for laboratory use. PCR is useless even for laboratory use, but we're not supposed to be using these things for diagnosis. It's been admitted since Kerry Mullis. Some people say that he said that. Anyways, I won't get into that, but
We've
that's a
covered
little
it.
bit deeper. But I'm
We've
like
covered
word
it.
vomiting here a bit. But I mean, like, the evidence is in the papers, and, like, the evidence is in the objective methods and results, but it all got twisted in the discussion section, right? When we're discussing the results, that's when we sort of twist things to make it fit our theories and all that stuff. And then I realized that, and that was one of the biggest things that kind of changed me over to the terrain side of things, because the terrain, just the way that it's explained, seems to actually explain and predict all of the things that occur, right? Like, it's everything is the environment. So maybe we can, I don't know where you want to take it. I'll, like, give it back to you there.
Well, we'll jump into a bunch of stuff, but no doubt someone triggered you into being a conspiracy theorist, and you obtained an absolute wide realm of freedom from what occurred after that. And a lot of us went, just like you said, into a subject to prove that what we had learned was correct. We were defending
Yeah.
what had been built for us, what not only opinions, but what things we memorized, we were tested upon, and we shared repeatedly for years and years and years. And we set out to defend that. And that's the only reason I think that there is so many valid, like, people having this conversation now because of COVID, directly, because COVID was one of those things where these voices came out of nowhere and started introducing things that just didn't align with what we were taught, and we had to defend it and go down the wormhole. And lo and behold, what we found is not what we expected. The change, the absolute change that inspires, that spawns, is it's not really even relatable to most people yet. If they're still thinking that way, if they're still defending the indoctrination, I can't actually offer them the freedom that going down that path yourself and proving or misproving things is going to lead you to. But yeah, man, we all share a similar story on that. And yeah, we've gotten into Kerry Mullis and the testing on this channel a couple different times in different podcasts, and he said it himself. This is not testing for anything, and you're not going to find anything by using it in that regard. What is the most fascinating thing that you found when you were researching germ theory that or terrain theory for that matter, that you want to share with everybody?
The thing that really changed my mind, it was just the Rosnow papers, the 1918 Spanish flu papers. They're really fundamental. I mean, it's the most natural, controlled way to try to introduce disease, and there was just absolutely zero disease in the experimental groups. Um, that's really what turned it around. And the contagion studies in general, like when people ask, what kind of papers should I show people or talk about, I'm like, the contagion papers. It's as simple as that. We've done controlled studies with contagion. It's very simple. There's a reason we don't do them anymore, and we say it's because of ethics, but we could very easily do this in animal models, but we don't, because it's simply not going to yield the results. Like all this nonsense with the bird flu, and cows are getting the avian flu and all this. It's just nonsense. Very simply, do a control experiment. We say it's unethical, but we're killing whole herds of cattle and whole flocks of chickens, like hundreds and thousands of these animals. We're just killing them because of a PCR test that's never actually been validated by science. So it'd be very simple to run these experiments, but we just don't do it, because obviously the truth would be very clear at that point. And we say it's ethical, but then we just go and murder a bunch of animals. So it's kind of backwards.
Do you have anybody close to you, friends or family, that still believes that you're trying to share that with?
I mean, I'm pretty diplomatic guy. I don't try to convince my family and friends of anything. I find the best results that I've ever gotten was just becoming the best version of myself. And just learning as much as I possibly can until, it's really undeniable. Like people will just say like they can make comments about my thoughts and whatever, but I drink more raw milk and eat raw meat, and what I mean? Like I'm never getting sick. So people can say what they want about it. Oh, you're gonna get salmonella, but then a year, 2 years go by, I'm eating this stuff every single day, and what are they gonna say, right? So you got to kind of lead by example. I don't really tend to argue with people that disagree wholeheartedly, because it's just not going to get anywhere. There's a certain type of person that you can talk to about this stuff, and um, I always just approach it from curiosity. I'm like, I'm open to hearing, what you think about this. Like, where do you think this actually makes sense if there's all these, So I mean, there's a lot of people around me that don't think the way I do, and that's okay. I mean, we don't have to all agree either. I think that what it really comes down to is, as long as you're not stepping on my feet, I'm not going to step on yours. Just let me live my life, and I'm not going to bother you. So once you come over here, you start telling me how to live my life, and I got to take certain injections and medical procedures and eat a certain way. Then I'm like, all right, that's enough of that. I don't tell you that you're killing yourself eating McDonald's and whatever. But yeah, I mean, the people that I'm closest with, who it really matters most, we're all on the same page for the most part, so it's pretty good.
I've got close family members, my parents included, who step by step they're opening up to a little bit more and a little bit more as they, as you said, see me live this way, eat the raw milk, and just the entire lifestyle, and not being afraid of germs, and no, you're not going to get me sick. You can sneeze around me, it's okay. You don't have to protect me from anything. We're all creating our conditions every day, creating what's in our environment. And yeah, we have the conversations all the time, but it was really funny to see the progression of individuals who still are, holding on to germ theory, but just thinking about it a little bit more. It's catching on. There's definitely individuals who I thought would never, ever let this be even really entertained, and now they're thinking about it. So we're getting somewhere, regardless of whether
Absolutely.
we're shoving it into their face or just letting them watch us, observe us, or what.
Yeah.
So
100%.
you decided to start the podcast. You decided to make this your mission. What was the mission of the podcast?
Well, it's kept me really accountable for learning all the time. So that's a bonus. I've learned at a faster rate than I've ever learned, in any time in my life. It's really fun. I'm meeting some really cool people. I love talking about this stuff, like especially on like I love going very deep into these topics, and I just, you know, even though I have people around me that completely agree with what I think, they don't care enough to really delve into the study. So the podcast is great for that because I can talk to people who are just as nerdy as me into this stuff. So yeah, I mean that's kind of the big stuff. Like I just wanted to learn more, share. I thought it'd be cool, have a little podcast, and meet a lot of people. Good for networking. Like, I mean I'm meeting some amazing individuals. So really happy about that. Yeah. I mean, I don't make any money off the podcast, so it's definitely not for that because I haven't made a penny off of it. Anyways, that's fine. That's not what it was for, right? So
Yeah,
yeah.
some of these missions, I think you're going to get validated and you're going to get rewarded in so many other ways besides monetarily that it can't be just about that. And those that have chased money have certainly found the inadequacy in having it and wanted something else on the backside of it. I've done that myself. So I guess if you're picking up things that are good for your health, health is wealth in itself. So what is
Absolutely.
the best thing that you've adopted to your life since starting the podcast?
That's a great question. I mean, I've definitely started eating more raw food. Like I was drinking like raw milk and I never really got into like eating meat and organs and all that stuff. I think until I met I think you had him on, Wes Rowe.
Yeah,
He's great. The Real Natural Human Diet. He's awesome, man. Like he's a really cool guy. I think he's really one of the biggest like guys that influenced me to do that. So when I had him on the show, I was like, even a couple weeks before, I was like, I gotta start, I gotta try this. Like, and I was drinking like raw eggs and raw milk, but like, I was like, man, I just gotta go for it. So then I got some good quality beef and I was like, started eating that. And I was like, oh, this is actually pretty good. Like, I'm like, I really liked it. So I was like, all right, that's easy. This is easy. It's really easy to implement. I don't eat full raw. Like, I eat cooked meals like pretty well every day. And I eat raw food every day. I just have a little balance of both because I think that, eating with family and is another really, really important part. And that's a tougher one to get the family on board with eating raw meat, but that's fine.
100%.
Yeah, as long as it's whole foods, I think that's really the kicker. But yeah, I mean, if you want to optimize, which I do like that part of it, but I want to optimize balance too, right? So there's this interesting dynamic there where trying to optimize and be like, okay, maybe I should eat full raw, but I also want to like optimize my family life. And so like if I'm just gonna eat a slab of raw beef at the table, like I mean it doesn't matter at the end of the day, but like I don't know, I like sharing food with family, like so that's a big part of it, and I feel like the love that goes into some of the food that's made is another big component of health. Like it's beyond, I mean, what did I implement? Man, I learn more and more and more every episode that I record, in between episodes, making the Instagram videos, making the YouTube videos. I'm learning so much. I'm implementing all the time. Another good one. I started sitting on the floor after talking to Brian Michelson. Great guy, Zambian dude, like all about primal movements. He really got me into that. I had no, idea of that side of things before talking to that gentleman. And now I'm sitting on a sheepskin on the floor, moving around different positions with my legs, stretching my hips out. My hips, I'm getting more flexible, stronger in these positions. Um, really, really simple thing that you can do, just sitting on the floor. So I do some work from the floor. I still sit in chairs, and I'm not gonna not sit in a chair when I'm eating dinner. You know what I mean? But like, there's the balance piece. But yeah, that's like just little things like that. Little small tweaks in lifestyle like make a big difference. And they're very simple.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's a little uncomfortable to change. Like it was uncomfortable for me to try raw meat for the first time, but you dress it up nicely like some tartare and you're gonna have a good meal. Like same sitting on the floor, my back, was like, oh, I'm not used to this, and my hips were all tightened. Like now I'm used to it, right? So there's just that accustomed piece that you're not used to. We're used to this cushy lifestyle that everything is, comfortable, but we got to get out of our comfort zone a little bit. So
100%. I could not agree more. Have you gotten into Asian squats yet?
I don't know if I'm familiar with that. No.
Literally look up Asian squat. It's when you are in a squat position, but your tail is almost on the floor.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. All the time, man.
Yeah.
All the time. I didn't know it was called that.
Uh,
We always call it yogi squat
yeah,
because
like a
my
yogi
wife's
squat.
a yoga teacher. So
Oh, there you go. You're
yeah,
getting
man.
you're getting all kinds of postural advice all the time.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
were you grounding before you started the podcast, doing stuff like that?
Yeah, I was doing all that stuff. Like I really like, I was really trying to integrate with nature as much as I could, but it's just all these small little things you don't think about. Like sitting in a chair, you don't think about this might not be the best for my alignment, my posture. And another thing I got into was like osteopathy. I think that's probably one of the best practitioners that you can go see, especially for, the physical body. Just even the energetical body, they talk a lot about that, how, having the physical body in line allows the energy to move properly. And that's a whole like rabbit hole that I went down for a bit. Like I love osteopathy. I feel amazing. I had some shoulder problems and I went to physio, went to different physios. I probably went to 10 different physiotherapists. None of them could help me. Um, Went to osteopathy, never looked back. It was simple. Like it was
What
a
was
couple sessions. So
what was the difference? What did they do?
it was body work. The physiotherapists were telling me to, like do these exercises and recorrect all these different things. And they were all telling me that it was different muscles caused by this muscle or this tendon or ligament or blah, blah, blah. They were all telling me different causes. I go to the osteopath. They get you in there, they align you up, they do these little subtle movements that you think that they're a quack or something. They're not doing anything because you leave there, you're like, I just paid $80 for 20 minutes. Like, what the hell was that? And then you leave, and the next day you're a little bit sore, and then you're loose, man. Like my shoulders, I unlocked so much movement after my first session alone. It was unbelievable. I never experienced anything like that. It was shocking. It was shocking. And I was like just a little skeptical too going in. I wasn't like, I was like, oh, all right, like I don't know. And then when I left, I was like, wow, this has got to be, this isn't gonna work. But then the next day and the week after, and then I went back. Yeah, I love it now.
That's incredible. You're the first person that's ever had that to say about osteopathy. Like I've never actually. I don't think anybody's ever told me that.
Yeah, it's cool, man. It's a really cool field. It's really interesting. It's so subtle, but you know, working with the subtleties of the body, like and aligning it in that way, is something I've kind of been tuning into a little bit more. Those small subtle shifts, and it starts at the feet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like so training my feet. I did start that before the podcast, but I had really bad like flat feet, and I just started training them, and now my arches are coming back. I got a better toe splay, stuff like that. And that's where it starts, right? So like if your feet aren't properly grounding, right, not from a energetical standpoint, but from feeling the ground
Mm-hmm.
and working them properly, your hips might be a little off balance, and that throws your whole spine off, and then your shoulders are going to be off balance. It's very like the body is way more connected than you think on an extremely subtle level, even physically on extremely subtle levels. And that's what osteopathy addresses, which I think is pretty cool. And every osteopath is different. Now I've been to a handful of them. Uh, each of them are going to take a different perspective. It's kind of a running joke in osteopathy that like like there's no standard way of doing it. Everybody kind of has their own philosophy, so you really have to attune with the practitioner. And I think that's kind of a really cool thing that's lost in a lot of spaces, like even naturopathy, like now they call it naturopathy or the naturopaths. um they're supplement shills in my mind. There are good naturopaths out there, but for the most part they're supplement shills.
Right.
They sell their supplements, and it's very allopathic. They're not attuning really to the client. They might look at blood work and say, oh, you have low vitamin D, here, take this rat poison, because that's what vitamin D actually is rat poison, if you didn't know that. But so it's like it's very allopathic in their way. So that attunement piece of like, feeling out the body, like that's what the osteopaths are doing. You barely give them any information, but they know what's going on based on how your body moves, when you breathe, when you take a breath, when you move your leg. So very interesting way of working, and I think their underlying philosophy is something that a lot of practitioners can learn from, because that attunement piece is being completely thrown out the window.
Super interesting. Have you changed the shoes you wear or anything like that?
Yeah, I wear like mostly barefoot shoes. I haven't found a good boot yet, and it gets pretty cold here up in Canada, but I need to get a boot because I still wear my Timbs, and when I wear the Timberlands, they're like they squish my toes so hard, man. It's so uncomfortable, and the heel on them is brutal. But I've been suffering for a bit.
Cute cat.
Got my friend here joining me.
So have you checked out Vivo Barefoot? Is that
Vivo, yeah, I follow them on Instagram. I got Vibram, like the five
Five
fingers that I
Fingers?
train in, and
Hmm.
I walk in most of the time. And then I got like Bilenkas that I like. I'll play like tennis in and walk in. Just my general shoe that I wear. I'll wear it all winter too. But like if I walk the dog on a hike,
Yeah.
I gotta get some good boots for that. That's what I really gotta do. Yeah, and Vivo, I think Vivo would be a good one, eh?
They have a good one. They have a good one. I
Yeah.
was hiking a lot out in California and running the hills and with the rocky terrain, and you're gonna get sore feet if you're in the regular barefoot shoe and that. But they had a little bit more tread where it was protecting like the ball of your foot and the heel, and I thought it was
Cool.
really good. And
Cool, man.
there's
Yeah,
always
gotta get on that.
Amazon. Amazon, I swear, a million brands that are trying to compete with those guys now.
True.
So how did you find the osteopath?
How did I find mine? I just honestly, like, I got a recommendation to the one right near my place. Like, it's the closest one to my house, and apparently she's like one of the best. She's very esteemed in the field, like in Nova Scotia and even in Canada. Um, she does like she does a lot of conferences and teaching and all that stuff. She sits on the board at the college. Yeah, she was literally like 5 minutes from my place, and got her recommendation to go see her. She does like animals as well, and that's how I found her. I think there's some good directories too. Like when you're looking for an osteopath, like it's good to shop around, I think, because like I got lucky and she was the first one that I went to go see, and she's by far the best osteopath that I've ever been to. Um, but you just want to make sure that's 100% body work. Like you don't want to be like they can give you some exercises. Like the only exercise she ever gave me is like cat cow. So I'm like, that's easy. I can do that. But it's all about like actual spine mobility and trying to keep it loose, right? She's not giving you rigid movements to do. Like if anything, she's telling you to like ease up on the old bicep curls and bench press. Like really, osteopaths are kind of against that way of movement anyway. And I would be at this point, I think getting back to more whole body, holistic, primal movements are one of the best ways to train. But again, it depends on your goals. If you're trying to get as strong as possible, train like a power lifter. But that's just not my goal at this point, right? So that's something that's kind of changed over time. But yeah, I got lucky, man. Good osteopath right near my house. So
Yeah, we're in the day of Yelp and Google and Amazon reviews. We always check out the score and all the verbatim that has like people recommending them. So I think if you're looking for almost anything these days, you verify it in the comment section and the recommendation on the score. You work with any other healers or alternative medicine practitioners that
no,
no? I
no.
worked with
Kind of
a
always just tried to explore myself.
yeah.
Like I've done a lot of exploration myself. I mean, like diet wise and psychologically, like I studied a lot of Jung, tried to do a lot of that myself. Study a lot of trauma therapy stuff. I never gotten any of it myself. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot to learn, and I do think that like when you are like I did take a course on EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is like a trauma modality, all to do with healing trauma, and you can't do it on yourself,
Right.
and even in my study of working with trauma, the 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 psyche, one of its main functions is blocking it out. So trying to work with it yourself is a very difficult thing to do. Like it takes a high level of like objectivity, and um it takes a lot of willpower to kind of see beyond that. And even like myself, like I've not really been able to like, I don't think that I've been able to achieve any groundbreaking stuff with self-exploration, psychological. I think it's very, very difficult. I think if anything, you need to talk to like family members, friends, people in the community, whatever, like elders. Generally, that's what you do in the ancestral time, and they'd tell you how it is. They'd be honest with you. And grandmothers, they're always known, she a sharp tongue, she'll tell you what it is, so these are like the ways that you can kind of break those walls down. But there's a certain amount of work you got to do on yourself too, like building up ego strength. You got to build your esteem up, and you can do that pragmatically. You can do that, through actually becoming a better person and volunteering and, achieving some sort of meaningful lifestyle, stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, no like energy workers.
Yeah.
I've never been to a naturopath. I mean, yeah,
I,
never, nothing like that.
I saw that on your page, and I was tapping into that trauma section, and I was like, well, I wonder if he's actually worked with these people, or if you had a parent that was, really in tune for some reason. I had to have an outside look at what was going on with me, more than once. I'm probably twice your age, I'm guessing, but I had one somatic when I had a back tighten up on me, and it was another referral. Person I respected at the time was just like, here, just see this lady, and she definitely took a look and really got me to relax and open dialogue with myself that I just couldn't do on my own. So definitely having that other view, and even speaking certain things into your subconscious that you might kind of need to kind of give you that little boost or that little openness to maybe address some things that are under the surface. But you also said something there about living a better life, and I'm just going out on a limb here. I'm going to suggest that maybe your podcast is service in that regard. I know it's not I know it can't all be for yourself, because I mean, you wouldn't take so much time and put so much energy into, kind of creating something that's very palatable for people that are on the fence or aren't quite on your side of reality even.
Yeah. Definitely. It's content. It's for, hopefully educational, maybe a little entertainment purposes, there's always a little bit of self-service. Like I think that I, would like to be established in the field as maybe some sort of expert on this subject matter. I'm definitely not there yet, but this is kind of the beginning of my journey, right? So I think that might be the self-service part of things. Like I do love academia. I'm really sad that it's in the state that it's in. Like I really want it to be like, you know, I just love like debates, and I love all that sort of stuff. Like and so this was kind of my foot in the door, and trying to really put myself on that path. So there is a little bit of self-service in everything that we do, but yeah, I hope that I want to make good episodes. I want people to enjoy it. I've had amazing feedback. That's what really drives me the most, is hearing people's comments, their criticism, everything that they think, they're sharing with me based off the work that I'm doing. So it's very, very rewarding, and I think that people do get some stuff out of it, right? Like even if we're just relaying a message, and so yeah, I mean, I hope that it's entertaining and educational 100%, man. Like I really hope that it is.
What are your thoughts on Jordan Peterson?
I listened to a lot of Jordan Peterson in my day. I've listened to his books, hours of his lectures. I don't want to say all of his YouTube lectures, but a lot of them. I like the guy. I mean, where he's at now, I think is different than where he was when he was a professor. I don't really keep up with what he's doing now. And I can't speak really on his political affiliations. I know he's like big into the Israel stuff, and I shouldn't say too much about that,
The
but I mean,
evolution of Jordan
yeah,
Peterson. It's a very interesting case. But like
it is.
yourself, I found him when I needed him. I found those lectures at a point in time when all of the information that he presented was very valid, very eye-opening, and it served a really amazing purpose for me
Mhm.
personally.
I mean, he's certainly helped me on my journey. There's no doubt about it. And I think that you can learn from anyone. You can learn from anybody, whether they be corrupt, whether they be whatever. You just got to be able to decipher what's the bullshit and what's the truth.
Mm.
And I think I don't think he was endowed with too much bullshit at that time,
Mm-hmm.
at least in his mind. I think that, there was a time where he was genuinely being like the best, version of himself and giving out his best to everyone. Not to say that he's not necessarily doing that now. Maybe he's just sort of confused a little bit, but
We're
um, you know,
contractually obligated.
yeah, exactly, right? So that's a big thing, right? Like that's the reality of the
Mm-hmm.
situation. But I still think that his books are pretty good, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think what he wrote is good. I think it's helpful generally, like for young men. I think if young men want to get on a life, and find some sort of purpose and meaning, I think that he's a pretty good resource. Go to his old stuff. That's all I would say is go watch his old lectures, and his books are good. I liked his books. I mean, I got nothing wrong with that. I've read a lot of books that are people that are in the terrain field, and there are certain things that you disagree with. Everyone's an individual. There's no one that I've ever met in my life that I fully agree everything 100% down to the wire. There's always some sort of little tidbit, at least, morally or whatever, like that I disagree with,
Right.
right? So you got to be your own person, and you got to be comfortable in being your own person. And again, that's not a bad thing. I'm sure like I could disagree with Cowan and Kaufman and all these people that I look up to. Doesn't mean they're great minds on great paths doing great things and that I don't respect them. I love those guys. I have so much respect for those individuals, like unbelievable amounts. So yeah, I mean, you just got to kind of be your own person.
Yeah, I brought it up for twofold. One, to cover exactly what we just did, and two, because you gotta believe he put 25 to 30 years in before anybody came across those lectures, and before he got any momentum to them, and before he was in a place to make a serious dent on the world and in consciousness and in whatever any of the regards that you want to give him credit for. He worked a long time to do that, and he had to have times when it was challenging, times when he could have easily have given up, stopped putting things on YouTube, or maybe not take on some of the battles that he was actually taking on that put him in the
Sure.
forefront of the collective consciousness. So everything you're doing is absolutely, in my opinion, awesome. All of the information you're putting out there is awesome. You never know when it's going to hit, what it's going to hit, who it's going to hit. But I commend you for putting it out there and for collecting all this information when you're coming from the environment you're coming from at this moment. Is, to me, it's one of the most impressive things about you. So thank you. Keep that up. What is next for you?
I mean, I'm starting to practice right now, private practice for psychotherapy. I want to work with young men that we're in a similar situation. I want to do a lot of, I'm working under a licensed body, right? So there is a little bit of um, restriction, I
Mm-hmm.
guess, but it's a pretty open field at this point. Like have to abide to the code of ethics, which of course is not a problem. And within that code of ethics, you have to stay up to date with current research. Well, the beauty of scientific literature is that anything that you think is in there. So you can find, confirmation to pretty much anything that you think. If you think that vegans are good or carnivores are good, there's literature on both. Boom, you're fine. Empiricism, you can find answers wherever you look. So, I mean, it's a pretty easy thing to navigate in my mind. I want to work with young men, generally young men in general, trying to find meaning. Um, do a lot of outdoor stuff, experiential stuff. That's really the direction that I'm going in with my practice. So that's kind of on the forefront right now. Um, Podcast, I want to keep going. I got it's fun, man. I'm loving it. This is like, you're saying like, no, it's not huge, right? It's not huge. It's not, but it's like, I love it so much. I don't care if only 10 people listen and we just have, chats about it. Like I got some really fantastic listeners that, we talk, we converse about what we talk about. It's a very open platform. Like people ask questions and I try and find answers. They ask great questions. They push back on things that I think. So definitely keeping up with that. I'm slowing down on Instagram and Twitter and all that stuff. That's so much harder for me to do. I like the long form content. I like sitting down, having a conversation. Making a reel, a 60-second reel is not, it's not what does it for me. And it's great, there's a great marketing behind it, and there's a necessity to do it to get the word out. So I do that, even just to get the word out. But it's not what's optimal, and it contradicts, what I think is healthy as well, right? Like watching 60-second reels. So I really try to like spread that message too. Like, if anyone finds me on Instagram, I'd be much happier if you deleted Instagram and never liked or commented or shared or whatever. I think you'd be better off without it. So that's kind of like the message I try to take. But yeah, I mean, I'll still do some of the social media stuff. It's not bad. I at the rate that I'm doing it now, like a couple videos a week, I was grinding like 7 days a week posting Instagram videos. I was like, this is too much. So I had to slow down. I'm at a better rate now. I want to start writing more, writing blogs. I've written a couple blogs. It's fun. It's a lot of time and work to put out something that's quality, but I find that really meaningful as well. Really good to learn that way. And that's it, man. Learning forever and ever and ever. That's what I'm going to be doing forever. So
Awesome. Have you encountered censorship?
I got 2 strikes on my channel, YouTube channel. Uh, what like both at different times. So I only have like 1 strike right now until January 10th. So I'm waiting for that to go away. And only had one video taken down. It was with Justin Leslie, like the Pfizer whistleblower.
Uh-huh.
That video got taken down pretty quick, but that's the only video that got deleted like right away. So that was pretty cool. Honestly, I'm surprised that I haven't had more censorship. I think that, they had to probably pay these platforms a lot of money to censor people, because at the end of the day, all these platforms want is more users, more people using it. So like they don't really care what kind of information's on their platforms. Like that's not Instagram wasn't doing that. You know, I can't speak for Musk. That's a whole other topic with Twitter now. But I mean, old Twitter, they don't care that much. They got to make their money by people being on the platform. So censoring people, deleting people, that's counterintuitive to business. They needed to be paid off and compensated for that, right? There had to be some sort of compensation, because that's what it's all about. It's all about money at the end of the day with these big corporations. So I think that there's less of it now. I do think that there's a lot less, but again, next big movement, the climate crisis, whether they push this bird flu nonsense, who knows? They keep trying with this they try monkeypox, they try bird flu, it's constant. They try to start these pandemics, I think, but just it doesn't catch on. Like you need a good PR, you need a good marketing, like you need people falling over on the street in China to
Yeah.
get that stuff moving out, right? Like that you need that you need the story to sell. So they're constantly trying this stuff, and then that's when they'll pay the big bucks, right? Because then they, obviously they receive financial compensation for having these huge events, selling tests and vaccines and all this nonsense. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've been lucky. I've been lucky.
Are you following politics here in the U.S.?
No, I don't follow politics. I don't care, brother. I mean, both sides in my mind are just as corrupt as the other, and I don't think that at the end of the day, I don't think that politics is going to solve anything. I'm kind of like I love Austrian economics. I don't like democracy. I think I would be much happier with a monarchy. I don't think that that's a good model either. I think libertarianism is good. I think voluntarism is even better. But that's like, it's pretty deep. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, like at the end of the day, I vote with my dollars. I try to become the best version of myself. I will always support my community. I hope to be in a position one day where, I can, help my community out, build a park, something like that. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to have to like wait for the government to build, my kids and their friends a park.
Yeah.
I'd much rather be able to donate something like that, right? So like that's the perspective I take.
The talk here that's really interesting right now is the RFK and Make America Healthy Again, because we are the most polluted as far as food and water and all of our media. It's just in the world, we can easily agree that the United States is the sickest place on the planet. So with that said, they're talking about taking advertising for pharmaceuticals straight to consumers and making it illegal, as it is in Europe and as it is elsewhere. So when I ask about if you were following any of the politics on that, I was wondering if you had followed that or thought anything about it, and is there any carryover in Canada? Can you advertise to consumers? Can pharmaceuticals advertise?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can hear. Yeah, and I mean, I see that stuff on the timeline. I see it all over the place, like the RFK stuff. I think it would be great if there were policies, that do this sort of stuff. At the end of the day, I think that, it's the underlying narrative that's going to be way more like I don't know many people who see a commercial and then go to their doctor and say, give me this drug. I feel like it's probably more subliminal than that, but um, I think at the end of the day, people go to their doctor and they take whatever the hell they give them, right? So like it's more than that, right? It takes more than a policy to make someone healthy. And I get maybe RFK is a good person. Like I don't know what his intentions are. Like I really can't speak on that, but I do know that like to be healthy, no one else can make you healthy but yourself.
Right.
RFK can take fluoride out of the water, but he's not taking pharmaceutical residue out of the water. He's not taking the chlorine and all these contaminations out of the water. He can try to ban seed oils. I think that's probably pretty tough. I think, from a, libertarianism point of view and like a freedom point of view, you can't really do that. Like maybe we should make raw milk more accessible. If that's more accessible, that'd be great. But at the end of the day, raw milk's illegal where I'm from, and I drive to the farm and I get my milk. It is what it is. You know what I mean? Like, there's not going to be a government or a policy or something that's going to stop me from living the way that I think is right and correct. And there's going to be, so we get 4 years of better health, and then what happens? And then what happens, right?
Actually,
So
that brought a lot of people to the polls for the first time here. The raw milk in
I
its
know that's actually cool, though.
yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of
But then
mind-boggling as well. Like, oh, raw milk. Who knew? Who would have thought?
it's cool, man. I mean, that's cool. I mean, I don't know if voting really matters too at the end of the day, but I think that's another question. I don't really know, but like I just think like, I try to just take a responsibility point of view. Like I think that for me, like even like with these conspiracies and all that stuff, like I don't care who did 9/11. I don't care what size the earth is or what shape it is. I don't give a shit about any of that. Like I care about my family and I care about my health and I care about my own prosperity and I care about my community. I care about the land that I'm in. I care generally about the land too. I think that's probably one thing that I could advocate for around the world. But I think people need a little bit more like nationalism within their community.
Right.
You want to see your community thrive. You want to see your family thrive first, but then you should see your community thrive. That's the steps that I would take. Starting from like nationwide and then moving down is not the answer. For me, it starts with me,
Right.
and then we can move up from there. Because if I'm not taken care of, I can't take care of my family. And if my family's not taken care of, I'm not taking care of my community. And if my community's not taken care of, I'm sure as hell not taking care of the province or the state. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, but at the same time, should people be in trouble for selling raw milk? Of course not, right? So there's like, you hope that I hope that things are moving in a good direction. But all I can give is hope and faith, and maybe some energy, and not too much energy, but
Yeah.
maybe a prayer or two to that, because at the end of the day, I gotta kind of conserve too, right, and take care of my own.
Absolutely agree with you 100%. But I'll give you another slice of another perspective on it. And I was old enough to vote during 9/11, and I lived in New York
Yeah.
City. And for me, it wasn't 9/11. It wasn't who did 9/11. It was what actions that justified for our country to do abroad, which were, I mean, especially looking back in hindsight, they were just awful. And a lot of innocent people paid with their lives. So for myself, I've never voted. And I didn't vote because I thought any vote on either side of those, those two-party systems was actually sponsoring what they were doing abroad. So for me, it wasn't, left or right. It wasn't who did this, who did what. It was participation is kind of signing off on the decisions that both sides have made my entire lifetime. So
Mhm.
in that last 25 years, the only glimmer of hope, the only silver lining to it is that once upon a time, when we talked about conspiracy theories like 9/11 or the shape of the earth or anything else, aliens even, we were completely labeled conspiracy theorists and just mocked, ridiculed, or ignored. And in that last 25 years, the shift that I've seen, that I've witnessed personally, of how many people are willing to have these conversations, even just whether it be as simple of it's about raw milk, is a glimmer of hope for myself, to be honest. That's one of the only things that I would say COVID really, really kind of put the nail in the coffin on. It's like, all right, that term isn't really going to work. It's not really going to shut things down anymore because people have seen what the authorities will lie on or will be just so wrong on. Either you have to attribute it to one of the two. They're either wrong about a lot of stuff or they lie about a lot of stuff. And just that awareness and people coming onto the scene and sharing the information like you're sharing and sharing even stuff that's, you're right, irrelevant to our lives in the grand scheme of things is, it's interesting. It's cool. And, I like the
Yeah, I
momentum.
agree. I agree. And I think that, learning about those stuff, like learning about those things, like learn about 9/11 and all these conspiracy theories, like we're all still a part of my path. They were all still a part of my path of like, becoming aware to all the bullshit.
Right.
So there's, and it's fun too. Like some of these things are fun to look into. 100%, man. Like I agree completely. I think, just it's a reflection of where you are in your life too. Like where I'm at, like I just don't have time and it's not reflective of my goal. So it's almost like a distraction.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it might be helpful and might have been helpful, like I don't like when I was in, you know, like first year, second year looking into these things, it served me at that time. And I had the time and I didn't have the goals that I do now, right? And I think that just the path that I'm on now, trying to make a difference and take care of myself, my family, my community, I think that has just shifted my perspective that I don't need to know the intricacies of this unless it's something that interests you.
Right.
Like that's the thing. It's like I don't necessarily need to know the intricacies of the terrain model of health and all of that. I don't, but it really interests me, and for some reason, part of my purpose was starting this podcast, starting the YouTube and um, social medias and stuff like that. And, you know, I love it. I love learning about that stuff. So I shouldn't necessarily knock that. It just doesn't serve me.
Right.
It doesn't serve me at this point in my life. And again, it's like if I think about it really objectively, learning exactly why viruses don't objectively exist and why they're a laboratory artifact and learning about all of these processes doesn't really serve me except for, the podcast. And if that is, I think in a way that kind of does serve me in a way, but it wouldn't necessarily have to, but it's an interest, right? So you have to pursue interest. You have to pursue what brings you joy, right? Brings you joy and not pleasure. Very different things, right? Because then you could easily say, oh, well, it brings me joy to scroll through Instagram. That doesn't bring you joy. That brings you pleasure. Big distinction there. So yeah, you got to do what you love. That's a big one, man. So if it's conspiracy theories, you want to know everything about who did 9/11, go for it, brother. That's it. Yeah, I love that.
Did the research you did and everything you came across about the Spanish flu have any impact on the grand scheme of things in that way? Like, what's important to you, what the government will actually do if I allow them to get away with stuff versus what's really important and where can you make the biggest impact?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well put. I mean, great point. Like all of this, everything that I know has shaped who I am as a person, shapes my values, shapes my goals, shapes this perspective now of, moving past that. It served me and now I'm like letting it go in a way,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, um, it's not me like saying that, you know, Bush didn't do 9/11. You know what I mean? Like, but no, you're absolutely right. It served me. That's the thing. It served me at that time, and it's all about reevaluating what's serving you in this time. Like now, I could probably do a little self-assessment and look at my life and think, okay, what's really serving me? Like, what is serving me and my purpose and my meaning? I could go through and I would certainly say that learning about the terrain is serving me.
Yeah.
That's something that I would say. You know, spending and time on Instagram scrolling doesn't serve me. Maybe 10-15 minutes to post a story and comment on something, and my feed is pretty good. I follow some pretty good people that I try to follow, like people that I can learn from, but it's a very slippery slope.
Mm-hmm.
So you get over into the reels and I start watching some golf. I'm like, I'm screwed, man. Like that takes a hold of you. That's what doesn't serve you. I'd be better off down at the simulator playing, like practicing my swing. So it's stuff like that that you got to like reassess, right? And it constantly reassessing. That's the thing. Know thyself never ends. You can't just get to know yourself and then boom, you never got to ask that question again. It's a continuous process. And I think that's one of the first things that got me on this path. And it's something that I'm never going to take out of my life.
Yeah, everyday curation, right?
Mm.
We are surrounded by nothing but distractions when it comes down to it. So if you're a good curator, at least you're doing yourself a service and or something good to sustain you and help you build.
Absolutely.
Awesome, man. So the young men, have you targeted in your area? Have you started?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like advertising in my province for psychotherapy, I can't really do too much of it yet. I have a damn good plan.
Mm-hmm.
I like to think. But yeah, I mean, right now it's a lot of networking, right? Trying to build referral circles. But yeah, targeting them directly, it's kind of iffy since I'm going into like work under a licensed body. So um, yeah, but in the background, you work on background stuff, right? And then once I get the license, we're gonna let the floodgates open, and yeah,
How close are you?
it's tough. It's a tough market. Like it's a tough group to target. Young men
Yeah, we bottle every.
trying to go to therapy,
Yeah.
like that's nuts, man. Like I would never if I was growing up, I would never. But I feel like when I was lost, I wanted to seek someone out, but I certainly, I have my reservations about the field of psychotherapy in general.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that, there's a lot of um, misled individuals.
Yeah.
You know, I'll leave it at that. Like any field, but yeah, I think I would have really benefited from, I'm trying to become the person, it's funny, like you try to become the person that you feel like you needed at a certain time in your life. So,
100%.
that's kind of where I'm at with the practice itself.
Are you familiar with Chris Palmer, Harvard?
Familiar name.
He
Can't
he's
bring the picture of him
he's
up.
just bringing into focus how important metabolic health is with all of these diagnoses, and I'm sure you guys will parallel each other on some of these things where you're not necessarily wanting to lump people into a diagnosis and then offer them traditional treatments, just to put that,
Yeah,
kindly.
100%, man. Like I want to go on a canoeing trip
Yeah.
and like go camping. That I don't want to sit in an office, you know what I mean? Like every single job that I work, I never sat in an office. Like I planted trees, I fished lobster, I farmed, I surf guarded, at the beach. Like I never wanted to be inside ever, ever, ever. And I won't be even with this job,
Uh,
guaranteed.
Serving the 1%, and instead of going the Goggins route, going the traditional ancestral living and real energy healing health way. So I commend you, bro. You are you are correct though. You are targeting a tough audience.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it.
All right, so where my limited audience, my small audience, where can they find you? Where do you want them to find you? If they're not going to Instagram, where are they going?
YouTube's probably a good place. I love making the YouTube videos. I kind of just get to speak freely. I just put the camera on and I just go. So I really like that. I like the YouTube. I got a website with a couple of blogs on it, just like beyondterrain.com. Uh, a couple good blogs. I think the blogs are great, like pretty comprehensive. I try not to put anything out that's like, too limited. Like they're pretty deep reads, especially like the virology one, the one on the diagnostic and statistical manual that they use in psychology. They're pretty comprehensive, so I think those are pretty good reads. But yeah, YouTube, if you want to,
What's your channel name?
get the best of me. The YouTube channel is Beyond Terrain.
Beyond Terrain. That's it. Not the
Beyond
Beyond
Terrain.
Terrain, right?
Nah, just Beyond Terrain.
And
Beyond Terrain on pretty much anything. There's some good posts on Twitter too, if you want to like scroll through. Like I got some good posts on Twitter. I'm trying to like convert to YouTube videos. But yeah, the YouTube videos are awesome, man. I love them. I think they're great. Especially the old ones. Like I got some old content on the Blackboard that's like all about like the fundamentals of science that are super underrated in my mind. Like we went through and like fine-tooth comb, looked at science from the ground up, all of the principles, how they're not implemented, how they're misimplemented, how they're misunderstood. It's really cool, man. Really cool old stuff on there.
yeah, some of your Blackboard posts are radical. So I'll include all that in the show notes. We'll get everybody going to the right
Cool,
place.
brother.
And man, good on you. Thank you for joining me. I'm stoked with where you're going. We'll have to revisit this at some point because I know you're gonna do more than even what you're planning on, and it'd be interesting to fill back in and get everybody involved and hearing about it.
100%, brother. Yeah, we'll have another episode for sure. We could talk about a whole whack stuff, I bet. So yeah, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Bro, thank you for being here. It's been a great conversation, brother.
Right on.